Hey everybody, I'm Sean Robinson.
I'm Carson Grubaugh. Welcome to Living the Line. I'm really excited today. We have an amazing guest. We have the man who, as far as I'm concerned, founded the philosophy of information as an area of study. A professor at both Oxford and the University of Bologna. Uh, Someone who's been on advisory committees for companies like Google, on policy forming bodies for the UK and the EU, someone who's, I think, is probably, in my mind, the most important philosopher of at least the last 50 years, and someone who has such an enormous impact on the way our world is shaping in the digital era, in the ethics. So I can't be more excited to have you on. Thank you for joining us, Professor Luciano Floridi.
Well, thank you for having me over. And for those who didn't hear the background, we were preparing this and we just decided it was not the right place where to wear a tie. So apologies for the rather informal appearance.
I've made up for it by my sporting wear here. This is
right.
this is my new Minnesota chic. So we're trying to break it down a little bit here and be a little bit more informal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I wanted to ask Luciano. We were going to meet 2 weeks ago, but something happened, and you had to make a last-minute trip. Could you tell us about that real quick?
This is getting more and more embarrassing.
No.
I just hope that this video will not be seen by anyone. It will be lost in the myriad of videos on YouTube. Yeah, so just a bit of confession. Out of the blue, I was called by the office of by some people in Rome, saying that the president of the Republic had decided, out of his own will, to award me the highest honor that the country can bestow on one of the citizens, which is this knighthood. For intellectual achievements. And of course, as you were saying, Cassie, this creation or founding of the philosophy of information apparently has made some splash, even in Rome. And so I had to go, and it wasn't up to me to schedule when.
Yeah.
I had to meet the president of the Republic, and it was a very formal in the big palace called Quirinale, which is a beautiful, amazing place in the middle of Rome. It was a rather formal and overwhelming ceremony, and I got all the possible things. A big sort of thing to wear under my neck, signs of everything that come with the knighthood. I did ask whether there was a sword with it, but they say no. But apparently, she's threatening to buy one of those for reenacting theater kind of items. So if you see me wearing a sword one of these days, don't worry. It's just me going crazy.
It's just because you're a knight now. So partially, I just wanted to say congratulations. That's amazing. But also, like, if you're not in a suit and tie, it's okay. You're leveling up like the academic content of our channel so far. It's as classy as it can get. So thank you so much. So the main thing, because you're super busy, the main thing I wanted to dig into, I'm going to jump in right away, is in your issue 5, Abolition of Man, that's based on your essay about human dignity. The concept that I find extremely interesting is the idea of the anthro-eccentric, and maybe you can expand on that a bit, but also you ground that in the uniqueness of humans as poiesis, that we involve in poetic activity, and that seems like highly related now that we have AIs that are doing that for us. And so I'm wondering, like, since you wrote that essay and since you've been exposed to these AIs, do you think there's a new, like, poetic meaning maker in the game?
I think that we shouldn't be worried about that. And if there is, it's very welcome. In a way, going back to the previous point about putting humanity not at the center of all our concern, but at the periphery, it's not a way of saying that we're not important. It's a way of saying we are important in a different way from how we conceive of it in the past. So if I can take a step back to answer your question, it's not a matter of saying, as we hear these days, for example, oh, we need to develop AI, which is human-centric. We need to develop digital technology that take care of humanity, that they respect humanity. Of course, that goes without saying. Anyone who doesn't say that is insane. It doesn't make any difference, no, conceptually. What we're missing is that this new technology is part of a wider change in our sort of mental framework, which is pushing us gently towards considering us at the service of, not in need of, as it were, humanity. So let me use a simple analogy here, which I hope helps. We're not the ones who are being celebrated. No, it is not our party. We are the ones who organize the party. As long as we still think that the world is here for us, that past generations, all they did was to prepare the present for us, that we can dump on future generations any problem because it's us anyway who needs to be taken care of, that like a child, this is my party and I'm the most important thing in the universe, we're not getting the real point. The point that is being pushed for some time by many other forces, not just technology, not just the digital, not just AI, but also the environmental crisis, the crisis in business ethics, they also push for medical ethics, a lot of stuff, moving towards the conclusion that, you know what, we want to be grown up. We're not at the center, this is another point, of the universe. We're not at the center of the animal kingdom. We're not at the center of our mental space. That's the three big revolutions, Copernicus, Darwin, Freud. We're not at the center of the sphere of information, or the infosphere, Alan Turing. So are we not important? Not at all. We are at the service of all this. It's essentially asking, am I listening to what the world needs, to what past generations really need in terms of respect, to what future generations need in terms of bringing something to them, to what my neighbor is asking me to do. So instead of thinking, here you go, no, present generation, at the center of the whole game, it's more like saying, okay, what can we do? How can we be of service? How can be the grown-ups who organize the party? Now, of course, the grown-up who organize the party is very important. But of course, it's not the childish view that thinks, oh, everything is around me, I am at the center of everything. Once you switch from I am at the center to I am at the periphery, at the service of, then the creativity or the poietic, the creation of content, of meaning, what I like to call semantic capital, what becomes also not just for yourself, but it becomes an enriching of our culture, of paying respect to what we have inherited, and also leaving something to the future. So there is something almost spiritual in all this, but it's not religious in a sort of obvious way, because we're not being told by another entity, by a god, or by the sky, or the gods, the Greek ones, what to do or how to behave. We may, and of course I'm very open to that possibility for other people. But in my case, I think more in terms of, well, we can actually feel that this is our duty towards all the values and semantic capital we have inherited, how we can not only pass it on, but enrich it. Then comes to your question, like, AI, is AI enriching our semantic capital? In a way, yes. Think about not just the work that you guys did, and I was delighted to be involved, but also things in terms of, say, all the potential creativity that comes with the new tools. I've got colleagues that are going crazy in terms of new graphic opportunities that AI provides, just to give an example. But also, we know everything that is today digital has been transformed by more tools, more opportunities, more potential expression and creativity. So in a way, yes, it's an enormous, powerful ally for our semantic capital, its creation, translation, transmission, enrichment. The other side, however, would people say, well, but it's still technology, it doesn't, as well, consume semantics. It doesn't. It's not that my Roomba would be any happier if I add something to the garden or not. And so we should also keep in mind that at the same time, these extraordinary tools are there for our own consumption. Often, and I close here, otherwise we're never going to get to the next question, but creativity is often seen as something that is from the message sending kind of perspective. And the question is like, is AI creative? Is it innovative? Can it do something that is unpredictable? The answer to that is yes, full stop. I mean, it's a matter of fact. Anyone who denies it doesn't know what the technology is. I still have colleagues who tell you that AI does what you tell it to do, etc. They have the symbolic, line by line kind of way.
Yeah.
But the real question is, who is going to enjoy that? It's not just, once again, the sender of the message, but the receiver of the message. Once again, shifting the perspective. And the receivers is us. So it's not that at the moment, forget about sci-fi scenarios, but it's not that at the moment, if AI, say, creates an amazing set of images, the ones that you use for the comments, is also going to consume it in a sort of semantic sense. We are. And so all of a sudden, the creativity is a two-people game, is the source, but also the receiver. And whereas the source has immensely expanded, and we can have more and more, in fact, we could even have autonomous generation of, say, music inside. On the receiving side, it's just us. We're still the only ones who are going to enjoy that or not, like it or not. And I think it would be nice to concentrate a little bit more on the receiving side once again. So if you like, the synthesis of this is, as we move at the periphery of the ethical interactions, and we feel more and more grown-ups as the ones who need to take care, as opposed to the ones who have needs they want to be taken care of. We're not child, but we are grown-ups. That shift, that comes also with a shift in terms of creativity, as the ones who are going to enjoy and find remarkable things that at some point might be generated autonomously by artificial intelligence systems that are perfectly capable of doing something really extraordinary.
I think that the anxiety, though, on the other side, and I speak for myself when I say that this makes me immensely anxious, even though I intellectually understand your transposition here of being the host of the party. As a person who has made images for other people's gratification and my own gratification, and as a means of making sense of other things, the idea that image making and meaning making might not be the sole, might not be my purpose anymore, that there might not be any reason for me to do those things anymore is, immensely decentering. And
I think it's humbling in a way. We feel that there's more out there than we thought. That's why it is a displacement from the centrality. It's a bit like realizing in the past that we're not the only ones who have rights, because animals have rights too. But then being reminded that we are the only ones who have duties. Animals don't have duties. My dog doesn't have a duty. He has rights. He has the right not to be, kicked or tortured, but doesn't have any duty whatsoever, apart from metaphorically. You wouldn't say, "Oh no, he didn't perform his duty," but we do. And I think partly is the same with AI and creativity and the whole world, shall we say, in a very general, all-encompassing sense, art. It is a bit humbling to know that something can be created by an AI machine, by a system that has no meaning, no purpose, no nothing, as a matter of fact, when we think that it was only our domain. But imagine going back to Rome, say, you've been around Italy, and try to explain to someone that the most extraordinary representation, copy of the Sistine Chapel on the pavement of a street by a street artist is not Michelangelo. Say, look, but he's identical. The guy is a genius. He's one of the greatest mind ever. It's identical, and it's on the pavement, and he just did that some chalks and something. And you say, yeah, but you know, the Sistine Chapel is meaningful in a different way than anything that is going to reproduce that. So sometimes people will say, wow, this is amazing. You know, when photograph came out, they say, we don't need painting anymore. We've got a photograph. Well, if the meaning of having a painting, a portrait, was to be as lifelike as possible, yeah, but then what is really happening here is that you're reducing the human to a machine. You're not elevating the output to semantic capital. So if you're really looking for a human who's a machine and copies the Sistine Chapel on the pavement, well, there you go. If you have someone who basically has to take the picture of someone, like a king, the first days, etc., and it has to be as lifelike as possible, well, certainly a photograph would have meant the end of any painting. But the same for music. Now, why do we go to concerts, not live concerts, when in fact the best, so say 50, symphony, etc., is actually by that conductor, by that philharmonic orchestra, blah, 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 the recording, and you can be home and listen to that. But you still go and listen maybe to something a little bit less good, but it's the performance. So it's the human sort of experience that is of real value. So back to your point, the displacement is in the sort of, if you like, performance, in the almost mechanical part of our meaning giving, but in the experience of that means for us to do it and for other people to enjoy it, well, that remains entirely untouched, seems to me. It's intact. So it's almost like clarifying that the whole point in providing those representations was not the mechanical, the technical, which of course is a means to an end, but it wasn't there that the value was really added. It's in the experience of doing it and in the experience in receiving it and in the context in which the giving and receiving happens, that is really the difference. That's why the idea of that, you probably have the same experience. You go and watch a Netflix series, and after a while, some music there is always the same. And no, they don't tell you, but it's suspicious that this has been serialized by some machinery. It's very strong. I mean, it's nice, it's cute, but it does have that sense of repetition. Maybe not. But if it is a human doing it, then that human has been degraded to a machine. It's not that the machine is like a human. You're just transforming someone into a tool, which is nothing wrong. See the reproduction of the Sistine Chapel on the pavement in Rome. I think, back to your point, all this is reshuffling our ideas. It requires a better understanding of what we're doing. But I would say that it's also taking away some misconceptions of what art means and being an artist means, which is not just being able to master the technique and therefore paint something like as if you were a Renaissance painter. Because today, a good student attending a good art school will provide you with the Mona Lisa. And it's not Leonardo. It's a different story.
Do you think that this like decentering that Sean is talking about is part of that fourth revolution, the Turing revolution, or is this something new in terms, because it's not necessarily decentering us as like the information objects, realizing we're an entity. It's decentering us as the uniquely meaning making. Is that a new one, or do you think it's just part of the information and computing revolution?
I think it's part of this displacement, and whether we want to link it or not is probably up to individual taste. But it is this shift once again from being the meaning maker to the meaning consumer. Mm-hmm. That is really fundamental. You need to ask, am I the one who is going to enjoy both in the making? So while I'm the producer, I'm also the consumer of the meaning making process. And therefore, the person who will not receive only the meaning that I leave in the artifact, but also knowing that went through a process of meaning making, meaning consumption, that it lies behind. Now, it sounds like, oh, but the output is the same anyway. Well, there's a difference in, for example, knowing, shall we say, a pair of shoes. No, Italian speaking. Now, it could be indistinguishable a pair of shoes handmade or machine made. So what's the difference? Well, probably they handmade cost more. So you know of the price. But suppose they are completely identical. You cannot distinguish a thing. When I'm talking about semantic capital, is that because the handmade shoes come with a story. Yeah. They come with an individual behind who has also enjoyed the process of making it. So you're not just buying a pair of shoes, you're buying a whole experience, history, a line of, say, tradition, maybe inherited by a traditional way of making that costume or making those shoes. I think we need to be a little bit sort of bolder, if you like, in conceiving what is an artifact of aesthetic value or artistic value, because otherwise we do end with the fear that I may share with Sean, with you, that look, if it is just about producing this thing, this can be produced by a machine. So end of story. If it is just a matter of say producing a beautifully shaped glass, an Italian example, well, a machine can do it. So I might not want to pay for the extra. I might have only, say, $10, and I need to buy, a $10 pair of shoes. So that's all there is. Maybe it's a very simple pair of sandals, and those there is. But that's all I buy. I buy zero extra semantic capital. If I have $100, I may buy the same pair of sandals, but they come with a whole network and enrichment of someone making it. Blah blah. You get a story. Yeah. That's also what I'm quote unquote I'm paying for, and what I'm enjoying in terms of understanding me as a semantic entity. There was another semantic entity that produced and changed. Now this is going to be more and more important. It can be hijacked. That's the trouble. The people look only at the, shall we say, price of something as a signal to other people that they can afford something. Well, that is brutally idiotic. But the fact that one has understood that behind an object there is also a story, there's much more than just the object itself, that the process leading to the object is what also counts. Well, that's a lesson that we're learning these days. Otherwise, any sort of prefabricated, pre-cooked novel that you buy at the airport, and one of those things where he, she, fight, terrible, find the treasure, find, we know these things ever, that there are recipes for that. In the past, you had to have a human being not able with a pen to write that out. These days, GPT-3 or something like that will do it for you. It was rubbish at the time. It's still rubbish because the capital that is being conveyed.
Right, and back to your original analogy of the shoes, I'm not willing to grant your exception in your argument that those objects would be identical. Having held a pair of handmade shoes myself, I know, number one, if someone is actually making them to your specific measurements, you're getting additional value from that. Number two, the qualities of repair, the ability for those things to then be fixed at a later date. You find a pair of shoes that's made at a factory and you find that, it got too hot that day and the rubber has separated from the top of it and they're totally garbage now. The value of them as resellable objects is not the same. And I would argue that at least the level that we're at right now, the same is with this visual matter, that it might be good enough for the purposes that it is being put to use. And that good enough might drive people who are image makers out of being able to do this on a regular basis. And that good enough might be the thing that it encourages people to accept that as the level or the standard that things should be met at. Whereas, it's taken 100 years for printing to be as good as it was in the Victorian era in Europe. And why is that? And that's because good enough was good enough. Because the mass production encouraged quality cuts each of those steps, and yet that brought about an information revolution where people could read about the news every day if they wanted to, right? But it also meant that images in reproduction have not looked as good until 100 years later.
I completely agree with you. I think that's the other trap. So forget for a moment, as you say, they are never identical. The argument was like, even if they were, there will still be a difference in the process. Yeah. But they never are. And that's the second line of argument, which is fundamental. And the trap that you were talking about, that good enough becomes the standard, and it undermines the better is fundamental. We need to understand that sometimes good enough is a matter of affordability. I mean, the reason why today, imagine you have some rubbish music that you listen because you don't care. When you're running, you're not going to even perceive anything more than boom, 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 like as you running. So anything downloaded badly or given by a friend, that's perfectly fine. But if you want to have the real thing, the only way of going to enjoy that is to go to the concert. That will be unique. So there is something to be said about this second line of reasoning, which is fundamental. There's a third one, which we probably want to introduce, which is, as art develops, has always taken advantage of new tools. I mean, normally, my students say, I'm an expert, but I provide the example of oil paint. I mean, oil paint made a massive revolution in painting. I mean, people don't quite know, but I mean, Leonardo was still struggling with, and all the frescoes, including the Last Supper, are kind of crumbling because people were still using eggs to mix colors and stuff. So you move to oil paint, and all of a sudden, the nuances, it's extraordinary. You couldn't have artists that come much later in the 17th century. If a Rembrandt without oil painting is hard to conceive. Now, what I'm suggesting here is that we could also, and I see you guys, for example, doing this with the project in which you have got me involved. It's not just a passive use and therefore always replacing me, but you move on top of the technology and you start using the technology to do something that otherwise would be either impossible, too difficult, or outdated. There's a sense in which art also moves with the time. And today, one way of doing that is to ride this particular technology, ride this particular wave, and start using it as something that will therefore enable the artist to express, to create meaning, to inherit from the past, give more to the future. That seems to me, honestly, of the three things we said, the most important one. Now, the replacement, the good enough, but also the tool in the hands of those who have something to say in the 21st century. That's why the guy who is actually using same techniques and reproduces the Mona Lisa as identical is not a great artist, because there is no time-bound semantic capital in it. It's just a reproduction. Unfortunately, the Mona Lisa comes from that particular time. And unless you can go back in time and do that at the time, it doesn't make any sense to reproduce it today. I think that this is something that people sometimes don't quite understand, and especially for contemporary art, which can be very confusing. I say this just on two levels. One, a lot of contemporary art is experimental. We will forget most of it. So there's no point in going to a museum and say, oh, most of it is rubbish. Of course it's rubbish. It's experimental. I mean, we're trying. 90% of the things that we're producing will probably not be remembered in 100 years. It's the 10% that counts. You don't get a 10% without the 90. It's like asking for the tip of the iceberg without the rest of the iceberg. Unfortunately, if you want to have the tip, you need to have the whole iceberg. So there is a lot of compost, yes, but you look for the roses. And the other thing is, in the experimenting and trying and modifying, there's something that needs to be taken into account when it comes to the capturing the time of your culture. And it doesn't make too much sense to try to do something like, for example, a portrait as if you were a 17th century painter. Unless you have a message to convey by doing that, that is just, you may as well take a photograph, or it's just scholasticism.
Yeah.
Anyway, so back to you guys, so otherwise I speak too much.
Well, so I think the biggest concern that I've had this whole time, and maybe it goes back to your talk about like childish versus adult behavior. And I think me and Sean share this worry with the AI stuff, is that it's making the content, I don't want to say meaning, but it's making the content generation so easy that I'm worrying that it's devaluing meaning making in general, that it's kicking off the easy childish response, the like, ha ha ha, and treating it like a game. And I've even been seeing just in the news lately with all this kind of environmentalist stuff where they're throwing mashed potatoes at paintings, and then just in some of the responses I've seen to like when Kim Jong-gi, a very famous artist, I don't know if you know him or not, he died, and like 2 or 3 days later someone had trained a bot to reproduce his stuff, and the conversation on Twitter was obviously like, the too soon, it's gross. But at the same time, there were people saying, well, you stupid artists, you're just like sad that you're not getting your accolades for playing with pencils anymore because you have competition now. And I'm seeing like this kind of downgrading of meaning because everyone's just so interested in content. And so like, how do you think as a society we go about dealing with moving from the childish response of letting the tsunami of content just kind of dull us to leveling up to like the adult knowing how to block out the noise and find the meaning?
Now, look, this is one of the problems of our culture, and so far from me to be able to give a satisfactory answer, or no, I'm underestimated. I mean, it's crucial. I think there are a couple of maybe points, comments that can be made. One is, again, analogically, thinking about fast food and the massification of some kind of products. I mean, today, someone like my age is extraordinary to go to a supermarket and find that, for $1 you can buy stuff that is unbelievable, and in terms of sweets, for example. And has that killed way of cooking and art of presenting or putting together even innovative foods or the tradition? No, it hasn't. But it does have a deep impact. Perhaps not so much as in, if you following the analogy, not so much in killing alternatives or degrading the value of other things, but in perhaps following what you were saying, but don't misunderstand it, in quote unquote providing the wrong diet. You become unable to appreciate something decent because you've been eating rubbish for years and you are quote unquote obese. And now all you need is another chunk of that quantity instead of quality. And I think that there is a serious risk following that. The solution, and that's the second comment, is partly more education, so that we still keep and refine our ability to distinguish between the massively produced, the totally synthetic industrial content, which could be any little song that you download for 0.1 from the internet, which is like la 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 la, and from something that is much more significant. Now, I have faith in humanity, maybe misplaced. That will be kept, that ability to not only say consume a lot of quantity, but also being able to distinguish in quantity and quality will be kept, will still be there. But we need to help that. I mean, we can't simply assume that it's going to be naturally that people will be able to distinguish. Naturally, if you leave people in a supermarket where everything is super cheap, they will eat very badly, naturally. So you have to tell them, look, have you seen what's in this stuff? Have you knowledge, more education, more training, more understanding? Has always been that way, since we left the caves a long time ago. That's one thing. The other thing is less optimistic, and I'm afraid this goes back to my general philosophy, which is we need to make sure that everybody has the opportunity, the chance, the background and context to do this, to distinguish, to understand, to refine a little bit, not to eat only junk, etc., not to consume only content that is massively produced by synthetic tools that basically don't add any extra meaning. We need to provide everybody with a chance to be saved, so to speak. But I don't think we should have too many illusions about how many will be saved. It's never been that way. And honestly, if you don't want to make that a matter of who is saved or who is not, I think a more sort of intelligent way of doing it is how much of your time will be saved and how much you will be not. And I speak as a sinner. Now, I've been watching stuff on Netflix that you would be really astonished, embarrassed. But yeah, whatever, tonight, I can't do it. And I'm sure that stuff is produced not by turning the handle. Whether it's a human handle, no, that's what people like. And one more zombie movie, one more movie on Dracula or some type of blood sucking. That's what they like. Boom, boom, boom. And they're all the same. In fact, you can stop watching it. You don't even know whether you are watching that series, another series, another series. It could be a machine. It doesn't matter because it's not the source that matters anymore. Is that content is devoid of real semantic capital to some extent. It's junk food, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah.
So those who are saved and those who are not, I think should be turned into in how much of your life will you save and how much will you not. Can you resist the temptation of having that bar of chocolate every time? Well, sometimes, you know what? I have that bar of chocolate. It's delicious, and so be it. As long as I still know that, no, that's not good for my diet, and it's not massively produced, and it's not the chocolate as the chocolatier will produce it. That's crucial. But we have just increased the number of temptations in front of us. Final note, I'll be positive. At the same time, we need to remember that the massively produced content is also massively affordable. And that is crucial. We should not be so snobbish to think, oh no, only if you really visited the Sistine Chapel, you will understand Michelangelo. I know, but I can't travel there. So you know what? If I get a picture, even not that good online, well, that's better than not having seen the Sistine Chapel ever. So I just don't want to be so ivory tower intellectuals and oh no, only if you go to listen to the great master and then thank you. Like, but I can't own a Caravaggio. Therefore, I have to do with a photocopy on the wall. Better than that. So for all these reasons, I think that we're going to see a lot of interesting developments in the future. But the question of content is one of the big questions of our culture.
Your chocolate bar analogy, I think, is spot on, but it's also, if we're going to take it to its logical extreme, we're now heading for a situation in which chocolate is going to be available in every house, tailored identically to someone's existing taste buds and predilections, and on demand at all times. And the temptation will be to have that continually. And especially, I think about young people a lot because I'm not a young person anymore, and I have 2 young people of my own in my house, and I wonder what effect that will have. I realize that this is an argument stretching back 3,000 years at least, but I wonder what effect that has on developing youth to have that chocolate available to their specifications that they don't even know about at all times. And because that's the situation that we're heading towards, is your entertainment is not going to be your neighbor's entertainment. It's going to be your entertainment. It's going to be delivered to you to spec, instantaneously.
And the answer to that is not too difficult. The practice is very hard. The answer is who is in charge? Basically autonomy. Are you willfully aware that that is what you want, that that really is the kind, that chocolate, and then well, then enjoy. If it's up to you, and we know when we are a bit in charge, or we just let go one more of this or that. So the practice is very difficult because being autonomous, being in charge of one's own choices and for example, even the shape of one's taste, one's own education is hugely difficult. Precisely as you were saying. I think we moved from a world where in the past, I mean, quite not too distant, but generations ago, where basically there was no content. For most people, life was whatever the village was bringing. That the music played, with whatever instruments were in the village. Whatever kind of painting you had was probably in the church, probably badly made by a local painter and stuff like that. So music, even content, literary content. I mean, the Bible would have been probably the only stories you knew because that was the only thing you were able to listen to. You couldn't read, blah, 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 all this stuff. Oh, and not being able to read is just around the corner. So we're not talking about 1,000 years ago. But we now have, as you said, an enormous amount of content, more than we can possibly imagine, and hugely tailored, and increasingly so, to our specific taste. So that takes us by hand and say, recommend a system. You like this, you might like that. You bought this, you might buy this. Since you bought A, B, and C, how about E, F, and G? The temptation is huge. And I said, the solution is just reinforcing one's own sense of autonomy. I see this as a huge risk because, of course, especially at a young age, you don't want to stick out. So not only there's something that is increasingly tailored to your taste, and you're, say, 15 years old, but also you are part of a community that expects you to like certain things and not to like other things, to wear certain kind of clothes, not other clothes, to have that kind of haircut, not another haircut, to read that, to do that holiday, to have that attitude towards sport, to have. So the expectations, which have always been with us, they've always made us a little bit more gregarious and social, and I don't want to stick out too much, etc. That pressure is what education needs to withstand. Now, we speak so much about a society made of individuals, individualism, etc. The truth is that is a massively individual society. That the massification of individualism, if you pass me this strange combination of the two, is precisely what we're looking at under our eyes. So all of a sudden, it is true that say chocolate will be tailored to your particular taste, but you will be eating chocolate as opposed to something else. That's tailored to you, but because everybody in your group is eating chocolate, you eat chocolate. On top of that is your chocolate, not everybody's chocolate, but chocolate it is. So you have to wear those pair of jeans. They have to have that look, and it's not something else. Now that look will be just yours, but it is jeans anyway, and they have to have that cut and so on. So all this comes back to the ability of the individual to withstand social pressure, and now also synthetic pressure from the machinery that other people are using in order to dominate and control the individual. At the end of this whole story is control and autonomy. Who controls what? Am I controlling my behavior, or am I being controlled by some tools which then are controlled by other people? We need to remember this is not, and that's the last point, nothing is about the machinery around us, the algorithm, the AI, whatever you want. It's someone deciding that is a good idea. The company that sells me that chocolate with that particular way, with that recommender system on that website, blah, blah, blah. So at some point, and this is way too far in the future, and I don't think I'll see it happen, but we might also want to put some limits legally to all this. In the same way as, for example, we don't sell tobacco and alcohol to underage people. There's a reason. It's not just because of health reasons. It's because they are so influenceable. You pick up the habit at that age, you never give up. Right. You pick it up after a certain age, there is a chance that you don't get addicted. You may enjoy it because that glass of whiskey is fantastic, but you don't get drunk every evening. That cigarette that you smoke every now and then, why not? But you don't become, etc. So the addiction, all these behavior changing habits, being controlled a little bit more, I would see legislation doing something about this. We've done this, and for the, I said I'll stop, and I'll just read the last point. We've done this for advertisement, at least in terms of warning people. Now, you read a newspaper or a magazine, and it says, advertisements. We should do much more on the digital world in the same way. Imagine at some point a legislation that says you cannot use recommender systems when they are interacting with underage people. That's interesting.
Yeah, that would be really interesting.
That's
yeah, I'm trying to process that right now. The other thing I'm worried about with the individualized stuff, though, like you're saying, everyone eats chocolate, but there's also something about like everyone talking about Seinfeld at the water cooler, that if we get individualized information, I don't know like what that becomes. Then you're just like, yeah, chocolate's pretty great. This is my chocolate. And they're like, oh, well, I prefer like, so I worry about the social glue a little bit, like when everyone's narratives gets bifurcated just to like them.
I worry about that a lot as well, because whereas it was the narrative of the second half of the 20th century, individualism, and it was the narrative politically and socially of the second half of the century, because the first half was such a disaster when we put things together. Anything that was social was socialism, and therefore, you remember where Nazi comes from. So fascism, Nazism, communism, there were ways of putting people together that destroyed humanity and the planet with it. So we overreacted and said, you know what, from now on, the state, the society, the organization doesn't provide a project. The project of, say, the community is a meta project. Is the project of making sure that every individual project can grow as long as it's legal and acceptable. So it's like asking John and Mary, said they are married, and said, you have a project as a family? No. The family project is that John does whatever he wants as long as Mary's happy, and Mary does whatever she wants as long as John is happy. So, but we don't have a family project. Say, okay, that's second half of the 20th century. First half of the 21st, we need a family project because the world has problems that neither John by himself nor Mary by himself can solve. They can solve it only together. The example I normally give to my students is like pushing a car that is not starting. It's horribly idiotic to go there, push, come back home and say, I've done my duty. Job done, I can sleep soundly. You need to get organized. And it's so obvious. So there's a threshold, picking up what you were saying, below which individual efforts are not every little help. Zero. They just don't make any bloody difference. And I remind my students that turning off the lights and then voting for the wrong party, that is idiotic. Because vote for the right party and leave the light on, because that's not what's going to save the planet. If you don't care about doing the right thing, you turn off the light to do the right thing, not because it's useful, because it's useless, completely useless. Well, no, the next industry is consuming gazillions of energy per second, etc. So doing the right thing because it's the right thing, yes, but not because it's useful. You want to do something useful, then you have to get together. So the point that you are making, that we have too much individualism, which is almost like a legacy and a overall effect of the 20th century tool wars, this destruction of humanity and anything around it. Clearly, we overreacted. But now it's time to put some balance into it and say, you know what, there is a way of being social, of being in a community, of talking to each other, of getting together, that is called politics. There needs to be a way of passing threshold, pushing the car together. It takes 5 people, one driving in 4, 1, 2, 3, push. There it is. They go, each of them 5 there, push and come back, and we have wasted the opportunity. They sleep soundly, which is a big problem, because that's what we do. I turn off the light. I've done my duty for the environment. What else is required? So getting together is really the solution. But as Sean was putting it, it's not because someone puts me in the group, but as I choose to join. But that's a completely different story. It's not that I've been, as it were, grouped in a certain sort of profile, and therefore what? I am part of a group, because I'm part of the buyers of, say, that kind of car, or wearing glasses, and being professor, or blah, blah, blah. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the proactive coming together to pass the threshold and make a difference. Unfortunately, the 21st century has problems that require exactly that sense of community. And we're not getting there. We're still using 20th century concepts that have done a good job in the past, but they are insufficient now.
When we get mixed up, like what is good for individual versus what's good for society, and those two things tend to get talked about at the same level. And I've been noticing that more and more, that like what's good advice for an individual, especially in terms of becoming an adult, that may not be the same overarching theory you need to structure a society around. And I think those philosophies of like, they clash. People think, you know, that they're talking about society, but really they're talking about what would be good for a person, or vice versa. That seems to me to be the big challenge right now.
It is a big challenge, and if we want to use part of the ideas already introduced, when you look at the individual, you often look at rights, protection, and therefore blooming, flourishing, enabling, etc. When you look at the community, normally you look at duties, what the community needs to do, what is there for, what makes a community worth respecting, etc. And so this misalignment you were discussing is often also a little bit of misalignment between what I need to do and what I'm owned by. And if I look at myself as an individual, I normally look at in terms of, okay, there's the world, there's me, I'm small, the rest of the world is big. We need to protect me because I'm the tiny little thing with respect to the universe. So pile up all the rights, you can't do this, you can't do that, and to the individual. But then when we look at the other side, and me as part of a community, maybe you start thinking, okay, as a community, what do we need to do? What can we, you really get the other sort of attitude of saying, okay, we have a duty to push the car, the previous example. I think that there's much more discourse these days about rights, precisely because we are focusing so much on individuals. And there isn't enough discourse on duties, because we don't get that sense of community solidarity, getting together. If we switch that page to that page, then things are remarkably much easier. But look at what's happening to this country, the UK. I mean, it's completely fragmented into smaller and smaller and smaller groups of interest, down to the single individual who votes, thinking, what's in it for me? Not I'm part of the community, maybe I need to make a sacrifice. Maybe, no, if I vote for these guys, it won't be very good for me because, no, the Luciano, they're going to tax me. But that's the right thing to do. I mean, I'm on that spectrum of people who earn more. I need to vote for someone who probably is going to increase taxes. Am I crazy? No, I'm thinking, in terms of member of a community. If it went up to me, my own sheer personal subjective interest as an individual, I vote for the guy who actually is going to cut my taxes. I'm better off. But meanwhile, the whole thing goes bananas and collapses. So that is going to be difficult to invert that. It has a lot of momentum. And consumerism is precisely that massive individualism that we were discussing before, is the recipe for massive individualism.
And I think that tying it back into the concerns about AI and the development of these things, that is definitely the tug between the needs of the individual or the rights of the individual and the responsibilities to the community. I mean, I think that it seems to be to me that when I'm sort of processing the things that you're saying, that some of the anxiety that I'm having is coming directly from the sort of self-medicating aspects of certain types of creativity. As an individual who has had periods of my life, depression and anxiety, those things during those periods were significantly alleviated by certain kinds of activities, making music in a small group, mark making, even something as simple as like the sort of flow state or meditative state that I can get into when I'm making an image appear on paper. Not even necessarily something that I'm imagining beforehand, but just responding to something. And those as individual acts are the things that sort of give, at those bad times, gave my life a sort of meaning and purpose. I wonder if those same effects are going to be available to somebody if essentially everyone is the equivalent of the grandmother with the watercolor set. who's doing something solely for her own gratification and not for sort of the exterior purpose that has been set there. You can sort of justify. I have found myself in the position of being able to justify the satisfaction of those activities by the material gain that I can get from them, if that sort of makes sense.
That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. It actually brings back something that Carson was saying at the very beginning of our conversation, that poietic attitude, the creation that is in our own DNA as human beings. You deny anyone that moment of creativity, of the ability of shaping or constructing or building something, and therefore giving meaning to anything. Now, it could be, honestly, something simple like, I'm terrible at it, my garden. You just go there and take care of the roses. What for? I mean, they're going to die tomorrow. It's a bit a pointless exercise, to be honest. I mean, it's nature. So actually, it will probably do better by being left alone. And not that nature needs me, but it's the as they say, it's the process. It's the fact that you enjoy also, and I hope not to be too philosophical about it. You don't enjoy the process. You enjoy the fact that you are realizing you are that kind of person, a person who cares, that has the ability to go out of his own interest and take, as we said at the beginning, the rose in this case at the center as something that is worth taking care of. In that sense, I'm not at all in favor, or it's not the result, it's the process that counts. It's not even that. It's the realization that the process brings back to you that you are that kind of person. It's almost like a self-recognition in the process, but then we're talking about. So there's the actual, say, taking care of the roses, in my case. Then there's the process. No, the rose is more beautiful. Great, but it doesn't matter. Then the process of doing it, so that's what it matters. Now, even the rose may suffer because you don't know what you're doing, but doing it is already valuable in itself. Yeah, maybe, but then what is really valuable is the third point, which is by going through that process, I see myself as someone that is that kind of person. And that seems to me even more important. It's a knowing oneself by doing something that brings back value, not only in terms of the semantic capital that you might be building or the value that you're giving to the world, but also in terms of building a better knowledge of yourself, understanding yourself a little bit better, in terms of weaknesses and strengths, could be both. And therefore being a little bit more on your legs, be more autonomous, more self-reliant. That seems to me a little bit more important than even the outcome of the process themselves. If that is the case, then ultimately is a matter of feeling complete, not partial, and that comes only with self-knowledge. You can't be fulfilled unless you also have some awareness of that fulfillment. The lack of awareness of that fulfillment is a limit to the fulfillment itself. You get to that fulfillment by doing something that, independent of the outcome or the process, brings back to you your own quote-unquote image. That I find it convincing. But then, as you said, all this happens by having that sort of education, training, experience, environment that push it with others who show you the way. Because otherwise, it's hard for a little child to develop that sort of, it's not a process, and the watercolors of grandma and like killing time moment, that's awful. That's exactly what we should be avoiding at all cost. We spend so much time trying to save time for the right moments so that we have more time for the right things. And then once we have time, we'll kill it by doing something pointless. That's really depressing. But it's always been that way. I think that what we see today is a magnification. It's become even more magnified than in the past. But both in terms of good and bad, and it really has expanded altogether. Simply because we have more time now. We really have more opportunities for good and bad.
Do you think that as like in the issue 2 and 3 of Abolition of Man, we project like a world where everyone's like on universal basic income and the machines are kind of doing all the work? And so then you have maximized time. But I think me and Sean both have the sense that if you maximize time like that, for most people aren't adult enough to make good use of it. And I think a lot of people are just going to crumble into depression. And while, I mean, COVID kind of showed us that, like they, once you get your 3 weeks of like, I did all the like cleaning the gutters and managing the vines and, you know, reading that book that I didn't want to read, 3 weeks in, there were people like on their like four-wheelers riding around on their lawns, you know, and it's like people just lost their mind. So that's another thing I think we're going to need to figure out is
because
how to incentivize.
You can't really look, I mean, it's hard to look at life with clear eyes, no? And the way in which we grow up in every culture is avoiding experience life as its raw, sort of brutal value, for good and bad, by getting distracted. And the distraction is the next job, the next house, the next car, the next holiday, the fight with a friend, a good tennis game, the next 10 gazillion billions of dollars, which you won't be able to spend because after a certain amount, you can have only so many jets to fly around, so many houses, so many yachts. And once you have more than I don't know, 3 or 4 or 6 or a gazillion billions of dollars, it's just a game, etc. But there is no distraction. The only value there really is what we're discussing today. How much do I enjoy creating something, building something, doing something that is an element of me out there. It could be something as simple as gardening, silly cooking. How much cooking is going on during the COVID? I mean, all my colleagues were baking this and baking that. But it could be anything else. It could be just going for a walk. And I'm not talking, oh no, once we will have universal income and everything, everybody will be enjoying museums. That's not true. A couple of points. You give mental experiment, thought experiment. Give someone $1 million. What's the first thing they're going to do? Probably pay their mortgage, buy a car, go on holiday. Maybe have a larger house, whatever. $1 million don't go that far for anyone who's listening here. Once you start doing this, you run out of money pretty quickly. That's the lottery. Now you go back and you see the person has won the lottery, $1 million. 10 years later, they're not happy, and they hardly have done anything with their money. Why? Well, because they didn't create anything with it. They didn't have that sort of poetic attitude. Now, this is where we find self-fulfilling satisfaction. You do something and you find that self-fulfilling. There is no extra after that. You look at the people who who retire, and hardly ever you find the people, oh, finally, I have all the time and they're depressed. Oh, because I don't go to the office every day. Oh, I don't have to do this. Okay, well, first of all, you didn't know you were getting there. Secondly, is that your life? So your life was a distraction, a postponement of the moment where you would find a life that is meaningless, because the only meaning in their life was basically outsourced, was provided by your job, your social interactions, your role in society. So that's really sad. But what is important, therefore, is to prepare oneself. Now, I'm a philosopher, so that's what you get from a philosopher. But as I say, it could be anything as silly as building a collection of butterflies, which I discovered, poor butterflies, but or being the one who has read every book ever written by that author, and that's or supporting a football team or something, but something that generates that sense of creation, participation, and therefore gives you back meaning. You don't get that, and that's where life starts getting really difficult. Normally, we call them hobbies. The extra, and then on Saturday I do something. Well, pass me the joke. I mean, life should be a hobby.
Yeah.
Then anything else will be totally meaningful. If you don't live life as a hobby, then, as you said, you've got 3 weeks in your hands, you don't know how to kill them.
Yeah.
Kill time, which is insane, since time is finite and it's not that much.
I just keep coming back. Like you're really, I mean, this is why I've always loved your work, is every time I read a new article, there's some new piece that falls into place. And I think the piece that has fallen into place for me today is the idea of adult. And when you're talking about going out and tending those roses and the value of learning you can care for something, like that is like punching me right in the chest, because I felt like I was incentivized to behave like a teenager up until I was about 38 or something. You know, I just worked part-time and I could make do that way. And then in the last few years, you know, like getting in a stable relationship, having a full-time job, like real adult life stuff, it's been a real struggle because you've been incentivized to be a child the whole time. And there have been a few moments where I've had that realization of care that you're talking about, and that has been such an important moment to me. One of them was cutting the vines. We have these crazy vines that grow like, you know, 8 feet a week, the kudzu, and cutting those. And I found a lot about myself cutting those. And then my partner's currently sick, and like wheeling her around in a wheelchair and stuff like that. It's like the hardest thing I've ever done. And you just like so bad, or like, I don't want to have to deal with this. But the adult self-realization of my ability to care, and something that personally I find that very hard. I've told her many times, I said, I'm not a natural caregiver like she is. She wants to be a nurse. And so to me, it's the hardest thing in the world. And like finding that is, yeah. So I'm just now thinking, and I don't expect an answer. I'm saying I appreciate I appreciate you locking this into place for me, because one of the big things I've been worried about is how to move forward as an educator. And I think this is helping me see a little bit more, like, I don't know how to do it. I don't have an answer yet, but how to incentivize in my students those experiences where they face something difficult, but they learn something positive about themselves that allows them to become an adult. Because I think society is further and further and further and further incentivizing childishness.
So the culture that we are unfortunately immersed in is a lot, not the popular culture. There's also so much out there that if you want to find different venues and different approaches, respect. But the everyday culture, the one you get in massive quantities, is not a culture of care, it's a culture of consumption. And that's like, and the consumer is always me first. I consume, I need. Why should I do it? What's in it for me? The carer is immediately listening to what you need. How can I, help, or what will make you, etc. So it's not altruistic necessarily, but it's hetero-oriented, and it's immediately thinking in terms of, okay, I'm not the center, you are, and now let me listen. That seems to me that comes, speaking of a variety of things, comes with a culture that is, at least intellectually, philosophically, if you like, is more and more taking seriously a different way of thinking, which is not in terms of mechanism, but in terms of networks. We all know that in a network, the nodes come from the relations. You don't have nodes and then you build the relations between the nodes. But in a mechanism, you do have all the pieces first, very mechanical on the table, but each piece is on its own. And then the spring, the string, the little round piece, the gear, and then you put them together, bottom up. But then what comes together is really a coalition or an aggregation of individual pieces. Thinking that's the mechanism. And therefore, every piece in the mechanism may have the attribute, the challenge. What's in it for me? Why should I join the mechanism? I am a little spring here, little gear there. I'm a round piece of something else. And why should I? I mean, what? Oh, because I get something out of it. Oh, it's better to be in the mechanism. The node doesn't have that liberty because it doesn't exist without relationship. There's no node. No, there's no me, you, Shauna, before the actual interactions and relations that build us and make us who we are. So inevitably, you cannot even start thinking in terms of what's in it for me in the network, because I wouldn't be without the network. So you're immediately thinking in terms of, okay, I am here because I am the sort of intersection of all these relations from past, future, present, people, and so on. I better take care of those relationships, at least even selfishly, because I wouldn't be otherwise who I am. I wouldn't exist. Now, you start thinking in this way, and a logic of care, as opposed to a logic of consumption, becomes literally a way of saving the world. Now, this is going to go way beyond our conversation today, but if there is a way of saving capitalism as a way of producing wealth in large quantities, is by making sure that these quantities are distributed, and in the creation of these quantities, we don't destroy ourselves and the environment while doing it. But capitalism does provide an enormous amount of wealth initially. How do we make sure that that capitalism is up to grade, upgraded to 21st century? By detaching it from consumerism. We need to have a capitalism that is non-consumeristic. There is a capitalism geared around the logic of care. And it's advanced cultures and societies like ours, they can afford to do that already. A lot of our economy is no longer an economy of things, it's an economy of experiences and services, which already shift. The idea between what is important is to produce more bar of chocolate so that someone can consume them, but more in terms of bar of chocolate everywhere is the experience of how you eat that bar of chocolate in my place, with this kind of music. A coffee is a coffee. But that coffee in that corner with that, etc. So it's the experience that makes the difference, the added value. So the circularity, as we were saying before, some ways of producing things are meant to make sure that those things last, as opposed to get consumed immediately so that I need to buy them again. Just imagine how we're building our mobile phones. I mean, it's ridiculous. Every year we are supposed to change them, seriously. When the next thing you get is like in three cameras, 4 cameras, 5 cameras. No particular company in mind. So there is a way of doing this intelligently, and that's probably the end of my little long monologue. Is this frustration of seeing that we're not doing it, but not because it's not possible. That is not pessimism or optimism. It's frustration. You see the opportunities, and you just think, like, surely we can grab them. Nope, we go the opposite direction, and we destroy ourselves and the planet on which we live. That's really insane.
Yeah, it is.
I have to point out that we're going to have to edit out you saying that a coffee is a coffee, or they will take away your knighthood.
As an Italian, I can't say that.
You've definitely not lived in Italy for 35 years, as you said.
Long enough.
Because that attitude.
What I really meant was that the best coffee in the right circumstances is the right circumstances that make it. But you're right. No, I might lose my citizenship and the knighthood and everything else.
Yeah, this will not go unchecked.
No, forget about the passport and everything.
I have to say, one of the unique things about travel and getting to experience other places, I feel like every time we talk to a European, we get a certain kind of, there's an aspect of cosmopolitanism that is not present with most Americans. And I think part of that is just living so close to people that have simultaneously a completely different culture while having a bond of time and interaction. Getting to I was privileged to be able to travel in Europe for a while in 2012 for about 6 months. My wife and I as street performers, and we had a kind of ground level view of some of these places. One of the things that I kind of flagged as a very interesting, very Italian thing was the tendency for people to leave a coffee for the next person. So you go to a bar and you have your cappuccino in the morning, and you pay a cappuccino for someone else to come in. And when we were in Napoli, I remember just seeing this happen.
Yeah.
And I only had like 100 words of Italian, all nouns, right? But I still understood. Oh, this guy just came in and was checking with the bartender. Is there a forward cappuccino for me? Has someone paid for me to have a cappuccino?
Yeah.
And it was just such a beautiful insight into one of the great things about Italian culture, which is the savoring of the moment and realizing that that is so worthwhile that you should be able to give that moment to someone else, you know.
Yeah, I think that that is part of the great values that we're discussing today, which is it's a value in and of itself. It's not a value for something else. It's not a means to an end. It's not directed towards something other than itself. In that sense, really is art.
Right.
Has its own value, and it doesn't send you to something else. The value of this pen is that it writes. If it stops writing, I throw it away and I buy another one. But the value of a gesture, a culture, a piece of meaning, something artistic, is not going anywhere else, but stays with it. And either it has it or it doesn't. But it's not like it's a bridge to another potential enjoyment extra. And those gestures, the typical Neapolitan tradition of buying your coffee and then leaving something for maybe the next person who cannot afford it, will probably pop in and say, anyone has left anything? Well, that's a value that clearly has no other goal but being valuable in itself, because the person will not be there to enjoy it. Is not even not keeping tabs, or will not even be thanked by whoever is going to get the free coffee. It's a form of art. That's in the wider sense of art. If you consider art anything that has a value in and of itself, not for other purposes. In that sense, we should cultivate that immensely more. And the view that humans are not like that, I think, is mistaken. That we are selfish, that deep down humanity is constantly looking for to further and pursue his own interest. And there's also culture. We are really a blank slate. We're very flexible, malleable. You teach people to be selfish, they become selfish. Of course.
Yeah.
You teach them not to be, and they're not. So being selfish is not something that I find, using big words now, foundational in terms of philosophical anthropology. I think it's just a badly acquired habit. And yes, if you acquire it, you will be selfish. You will always think, what's in it for me? Can I save something? Can I screw the other guy over not to get some advantage, etc.? But if you're trained differently, and if you are educated in a more selfish, more altruistic way, there will be as good as. So I don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong with humanity. There is something intrinsically wrong with some cultures. I think so. And unfortunately, the ones in which we live sometimes tend to sort of push us in the wrong direction. So that, going back to your example of being a little bit more cosmopolitan in Europe, it is partly because we also speak all different languages. And that you're part of a community where people really don't talk to each other, and not because they don't want to, but they just don't speak the language. And although in the States, obviously, it can happen probably more regularly in big cities and at the end of the state, West and East Coast, etc. But it's not your regular experience. No. Big country, the world speaks English, and also the world does speak English anyway, even outside. But as an Italian, to know that someone from France, from Germany, from Spain, from Greece, from Sweden, from Norway, just cacophony of languages, that also gives you a sense like, it's not a big place, but it's a big world out there. And it actually, as you said very well, it's in a small, if you like, amount of land. Europe is not that big. There's so much diversity. And intrinsically, deeply diverse, religiously, linguistically, culturally, food, habits, expectations. That it's hard not to be a little bit more open-minded about other cultures and ready to say, I think there's a higher level of coordination here, but who needs to respect all these diversities, which is beautiful, and in which, as we said before.
Well, that, yeah, I mean, I think there's so much wisdom that you're dropping. It's hard to even make sense of it all like on the fly like this. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know where to go with it.
Well, I mean, I think that we need to thank you for being part of this project, and thank you for letting your essay be attached to this. And I feel more hopeful about things having talked to you about this. We've had fairly pessimistic conversations about these things, and partly it's because we're processing these things in real time.
Mm-hmm.
When we had our first conversation with Dave McKean, who was a very great artist from the north of England, he was, I think, in distress because he's essentially seeing his livelihood stripped away. And yet there's commonalities between that first conversation and this last conversation, in that the conclusion that he came to was, I have my health, I have my family, I'm still able to do the things, I'm still able to do the things that give me personal meaning from this. I'm going to concentrate on these things, and I think that's a commonality with the conversation here. And not necessarily seeing that as a selfish act, but seeing that as an act of cultivation of personal meaning. I'm very grateful to hear your reflections on the cultivation of societal meaning and cultivation, activity towards a common goal.
And you put your finger on that adjective, societal meaning. We need to resist the temptation, Voltaire temptation of taking care only of our own garden. In great times of transformation like ours, which is huge. I mean, if I got it right, people in 1,000 years would look back and say, this was one of the major pressure for humanity. When we settled down into cities, agricultural revolution, 1,000 years ago, the industrial revolution, the digital revolution, that's the level at which we're talking. If that is right, inevitably we're going to be thoroughly confused, taken aback, wrong-footed, depressed, or excited. It's huge as profound transformation of our culture. But I think that the point that you made is crucial. That we need to resist the temptation of closing within our own world and say, you know what, no, I have my little garden, I have my little activity, I can do whatever I can. Remember the 5 people pushing the car. We will take the maximum advantage of this transformation, of this revolution, and withstand the bad bits, the pressure, if we do it together. On that, I have no doubt whatsoever. We need to socialize the semantic capital, the production of good content and meaning. Then their force is unstoppable. If we do not do that, if we retreat into my personal corner, your corner, and I say goodbye from my ivory tower and you from your ivory tower and so on, then we're doomed for a long time. Now, people will come back, but we will have missed a huge opportunity to make the best of this revolution. So the socialization of meaning making, that seems to me the thing that I take back to my own work, etc., from this conversation today, because it is really something that I would like to stress enormously.
Yeah, and it's this is a perfect bookend, like Sean said, because Dave McKean kind of got me thinking about, okay, the importance of the journey, but I wasn't really sure like what that's aiming towards, like of course you're not expecting to get there, but you don't want to just aimlessly wander either. And then this kind of idea of adulthood that you've introduced that I keep coming back to me, that seems like there's something in there that, like, as long as you're journeying towards that, like that thing, and that I think that's grounded in your ethics of care, or what you call the patient-oriented ethics.
Let me drop one more hint, and then I'll really let you go, poor guys. I've been speaking too much. So there's an ongoing project which I've been developing on a side, and I care a lot about, which is a little blog that I call Notes to Myself. I don't know if you, Carson, have seen it. And it's really just notes to myself. And I put them there. If anyone reads them, fine. If not, that's fine too. I'm going to send you the one that I wrote on taking care of the roses.
Okay.
Because it expressed much better than I have done today the sense in which it's not where you're going, it's not even a journey, but it's discovering who you are while going there for that journey.
Yeah.
It's the discovery of oneself that really makes the journey and the traveling, etc., worthwhile. Anyway, I'll send you this thing. So, whether you like it.
is that a link that we could put like below the video that people could follow up on?
I don't know. You want to have it now? I'll send you the link. It's available online. I also at the end of I've done already the first volume, but at the end of every year now, around December, I put all this together and I publish the second edition and the third. And it's really cool. Okay. But I'll send you the link.
Okay, great, fantastic. And then what do you want to promote? Do you have anything to promote? New book, new articles, people?
This one. If I want to promote for this conversation, that's the one. I put it I publish it with Amazon as cheaply as possible. And if you have Amazon Prime or something, it's free. Or it costs $2, something like that.
Okay.
It's the minimum amount of money that Amazon requires for someone to just have it printed and sent home. So, I try to put it free, but you can't do that. It's something just to put it on paper and send it home. So, but I think for the Kindle it's probably free. That's the one. It's called Notes to Myself.
Okay, awesome. We'll definitely link that too, because I think everyone who watches this is going to go, yeah, I need to read a little bit more of this guy. There's a lot of wisdom here. So we really appreciate. I mean, anytime I read in your stuff or get the chance to talk to you, I'm just always fascinated. So thank you so much for taking your time. Thank you so much for being involved in the abolition of man and contributing to the final essay and all of it. Really appreciate it.
And thanks for giving us a little bit of hope. I appreciate that. I'm gonna try to cultivate that in my garden here.
Yeah. Well, guys, take care, and I'll send you the link. But and I also watch whatever you come up with when you edit this thing. Probably is going to go mostly as it is, but whatever modification you have to make. Okay, I better go. Take care.
Thanks, Luciano. Bye. Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.